Good day, everybody. Hey, Rob Mazak here. I am a psychic medium, and I do a lot of different podcasts, as you all know. And I like to just start with an idea and run a script without a script. And tonight, I guess you would say, pondering life and wondering not why we're here necessarily, but why we find ourselves kind of just going through the motions and going to work, paying bills, starting all over the next day. It's crazy. And I'm not saying that a normal life or a life like that is boring, because it can be very fulfilling. But I think we are here for much bigger reasons, much different reasons. I think if we could see what's really the potential of this universe and this cosmos and the vastness of the eternity, I think we would realize that we are an integral part of this reality in this universe and cosmos, or all that there is. There's a lot of terms for that. But as I'm re-listening to Joe Dispenza's book, Becoming Supernatural, it really struck me today. He talks about becoming very predictable in our patterns, in our conditioning of our subconscious mind, that pretty much runs our life on automatic pilot. And I know these things, and you've heard me talk about these things a lot, but it just kind of struck me today that it was, I don't know, it just really struck me in a really strange way. Not that it saddens me, but it's really putting me into deep thought about life and my life and where it needs to go and how it needs to go and what I want to become. All those things start to kind of meld together and get tossed around in my mind. And I'm sure many people have the same type of events, I guess, in their mind, and they sit there in their home one evening after a whole week's worth of work and having done the same thing with the same people every day. And they're like, well, why am I doing these things just to have a couple of days off, just turn around and do it again? And, I get it. We're here in this reality and we need to do those things, because if we want to have cars and houses and food and clothes and send our kids to school and do all of those things, we must go through the machine of this reality, the way things are structured. And I think that humanity has been on this track for a while, where it seems like we're just kind of feeding the machine, like a cog in a wheel in a lot of ways. I'm not trying to make this sound bad. I'm just talking about what's kind of processing in my mind, where if you really break down what's going on, we spend our life trying to earn a paycheck, to earn money, to survive in many ways, in other ways to thrive, try to have more than the average person, to do more things, go more places, see more things, have some fun. And if you really break it down, we are simply working to feed the machine in a lot of ways, because everything that we do for money and use money for is taxed. And we really don't have a lot of money in the end. I'm not going to break all that down, but if you think about it, we earn a wage that is taxed before we even get it in our bank. Then every time we buy something, it's taxed. And so when you really get it down into the weeds, it is an enormous amount of money that we're not getting, and it's going to somewhere in the government there, and they're doing whatever they're doing with it. I think Ronald Reagan even said that back in the 80s, that in the 80s, he was saying that it was like 52% of our money was given away in taxes. And I can imagine what it's like now in 2024. Anyway, that's just part of it. But when Joe really started talking about creating a predictable future because of being programmed in the predictable past, it really struck me really hard because he was describing things and I was watching myself walk through those things as he was describing them. He talks about waking up, grabbing your phone. First thing we do is we check our Facebook, our TikTok, our Instagram, our emails, our text messages, on, right? And by the time we've done with that, we've basically remembered or the programming that we have of who we used to be in that comfort zone of who we are. And we haven't really started our day with expectation and direction in our minds or programming our minds for something unknown. It is very easy to stay in the known past, even if we don't like it, even if it's not our comfort zone. The known is a lot easier to get by in, because if we strike out on the unknown, we take chances. Will we be able to make a living at all those crazy ideas we have in our mind and our dreams? Can we actually survive, or will our family end up on the street? And there's a lot of things that play into that, and it puts us into this interesting, scenario programming that doesn't allow us really psychologically to escape from it. And he further went on and said, well, then what do you do next? You get up and you use the bathroom, then you make your bed, then you go over to the coffee machine, you grab a cup of coffee, you put the same amount of sugar in it, the same whatever, you fix it the same way, you have the same breakfast, you head off to work at the same job, going the same direction almost every day, in the same traffic, to work with the same people you work with every day, basically doing the same routine tasks almost every day, returning home the same way you normally do, maybe getting home, having some dinner, watching the same TV programs you do, going to sleep, and then just starting all over again. And so we get into these patterns of normalcy. And I'm not against consistency, because if you really look at success, people that have become successful, they've picked some things or direction or some actions they just do over and over and over and over again until they become absolutely skilled at it and make a great living out of it, or become famous or do whatever. So there is some merit in doing the same things over and over again. But at the same time, I think when you are doing things over and over again for that purpose of success, for example, that I think you need to change that up a little bit to become a little better each time. If we're looking at our patterns in our life, if we look back, like I was doing this evening while I was trying to figure out how to start this podcast, I was just sitting here in silence and just really looking back at the last few years, and I realized that story that Joe Dispenza was talking about in his book, or that scenario, is me. I'm doing the same things over and over again. And I'm not saying they're bad things, because looking at what I've been doing with these podcasts all these last few years, they really all of a sudden starting to blossom and things are starting to take shape. So there is some merit in consistency. But the thing is, how do we break out of that comfort zone when we have other people depending on us? Now, it's one thing if I was a single guy and I was here by myself, and the only person that taking risks would affect is me. I think that's a much different story. And I'm not making an excuse. I'm just saying that's kind of where that comfort zone starts to really solidify. It's like, well, if I don't keep this safe job, or I keep this safe position and continue doing what I'm doing and go out and chase that dream, which we have, or I have done with this, with the family I have, almost didn't end up all that well. Even when you do take those chances sometimes, and then you kind of get scarred in some ways, it's very difficult in our mind to go into the unknown again, because it comes down to affecting others that rely on you. And that really is a very interesting quandary to be in. Once again, not making excuses. But I think if we really wanted to change our life, we have to develop new patterns, because all those current programs that we have, driving, walking, doing things at work, all the things that we do every day that we don't even have to think about anymore, are so hardwired in our mind that it is very difficult to change that. Not impossible, because it takes time to actually do that. And one of the things that Joe Dispenza brought up, at least in this first chapter, I'm just barely re-listening to it, but he talks about something that I am really passionate about and that I have used quite often, is visualization, and running the movie in your mind, or your conscious mind, and playing out scenarios that you want to use to rewire your mind. Not necessarily rewire it, but create new connections. And so that you can develop new habits, and you can begin to get out of those old habits, or at least those will be kind of put on the back burner. And I've used that quite often because it's very simple, very, very simple, that your subconscious mind, he doesn't necessarily describe it that way, but your subconscious mind is like the private that's just listening to a general. It doesn't have any clue the difference between what you imagine in your mind, playing the movie in your mind, or speaking out verbally, however you're getting that message out to yourself. But in your mind is probably the best way if you can visualize. Some people can't. It's kind of uncanny, but they can't. If you play those things, maybe not just once, it takes a little time sometimes. I mean, every now and then, a single visualization, produces something very quickly. But if you visualize something that you want to happen consistently over a decent amount of time, your subconscious mind starts to realize that, or doesn't even realize that it's not real, and it thinks it's real. And so it goes into a rewiring paradigm. And so then it helps you create something completely different. And they've done studies. Scientists have done studies. I've talked about this a number of times in my podcast, but it's important, is that they've done studies like, for example, the example actually that Joe Dispenza uses is that there was a scientific study done where they had some young kids learn to play like a 5-key song. One group of kids that was actually physically using the piano, and they had one group that was only imagining doing that in their minds. And what they found is that it was almost identical, the new firing and wiring patterns that were beginning to happen in both groups of kids. And one was not even physically doing it. And so I'm not saying that we can get away with just thought alone, but thought alone, or thought in general, a robust and consistent and directive type of thought can really change your life. And I think the other part of that problem is that we have been stuck in this routine so long, it's very difficult for us to dream. It's like we've had dreams, we've had all these ideas and these big thoughts of where we would like to go and what we'd like to do. And many of us reach a certain age and we say, well, it's too old now, or it's too late. I'm just going to have to work until I die. Well, if that's how your thought pattern goes, and that's probably what's going to happen. Age and time and none of that really makes any difference. Now, do you get to a certain age or too old where some things are just simply impossible? Sure. But there's a lot of people that have started many of their success journeys later in life, or when they didn't have any money. And most of the successes, if you really look at the stories behind those people, most of those people are in those categories where they just finally got tired of being average and tired of the routine and tired of living paycheck to paycheck. And I think that's the other kicker. When you really get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you're just ready to get to or get on with the path and the dream and the goals that you want to achieve before we get to our golden years, when we can't really spend the gold like we want to, if we have any by then, I think it's time to start that process now. When is the best time to start? Is now. I'm talking to myself as well, because I kind of am falling into some of these patterns as well, even though I know better and I understand it and I can see it happening because I've studied it and I've been through lots of personal journeys and really dug into myself, and I get it. And I want to also not just speak this to you, but I want to reinforce that with myself, is that there are bigger and better things that need to be done, things that I want to get done. And I know there's things out there that all of you out there listening to this, want to get done. And the only way to really do that is to get started on it. Part of that dream for me is exactly what I'm doing right now behind this mic, because I've always wanted to be, to reach the world, I guess you'd say. Have that vision in my life to reach the world with messages that might help people, and to help people grow and help people get out of their own way or help think different. Just to be a voice to the world with whatever knowledge and experience I've gained in my 64 years now. I thought that in my mind, I was envisioning that as being on the big stage with the giants. Let's just face it, in our modern world, for me to reach the world, this is one of the best ways to do it. I have the biggest potential audience that there ever was, sitting behind this mic, talking into this mic, watching it appear on my computer, editing a little bit, putting it up on social media, on my podcast, and then the whole world has access to it. So for me, this is a good bit of the dream I have had all these years. And let me tell you, this didn't come because I just one day became good at it. I mean, if you listen to some of my earlier videos, they're not as good as I feel like mine are now. I think can always use improvement, sure. But the thing is that I'm chasing one of those dreams, and it's starting to finally begin to roll. And did it take time? It sure did. I mean, I was that kid that I remember in 7th grade, I remembered vividly taking a 0 instead of getting up on the podium in front of the class and giving a speech or talking about a story or a paper that I was supposed to write. I literally would not do it. I could not do it, and I wouldn't do it. Now, look at me now. And the reason I don't necessarily use video, for some of you guys that haven't heard it, I don't really have the equipment right now to do that properly. I would like to do that right if I'm going to do it. And I could do it with my computer and all that stuff. But this is working for now, and this is taking me towards my dream of reaching many, many people and getting as much information about the experience I've had, my clients have had, and the research I've done, all those things. So I encourage everybody to get started, because you got to remember that most things don't start instantaneously. Sometimes they do. Every now and then you have that success story that's just like, wow, that seemed like it was overnight. But the way I like to say it is, because in other positions that I've been in before in jobs, I've excelled like super, super fast. And a lot of people thought I was, as they would say, sleeping with a boss or whatever. All these comments were happening behind the scenes. And I basically had to tell them, it only took me 20 years to become an overnight success. The only way to really get 20 years of experience or any large amount of experience is to get a large amount of experience. You simply have to go out there and do it. And we don't have to necessarily make huge changes in our life and affect our families and put them at risk and, end up living on the street like I was talking about earlier, or the possibility of that. We can begin to start chasing those dreams by parceling our time out and making things important, right? We have 24 hours a day. Everybody has that in common. That's the one thing that we all have in common. Every one of us have the same 24 hours in a day. The billionaire, trillionaire, and the bum on the street. We all have the same 24 hours. And so how you choose to use those hours really determines your life. And I'm not saying we don't need to rest and we don't need to take time for ourselves or have fun or play. I'm not saying that. There should be a balance. But you need to, let me rephrase that. I'm not going to tell you what to do. What I'm suggesting is that if you're trying to chase a dream, you should parcel off some time on your calendar. Talk about it with your family or your friends, or you can say no to your friends and your family. Like, I'm not going out. I'm not going to sit here and binge watch Netflix. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to do me another podcast, or I'm going to do whatever that's taking me towards my dream. Maybe that's classes in college that you need to take, or some kind of training, or whatever. But I think we have to get started in getting out of that doldrum of the same thing every day. At least the same thing every day that's giving us the same results. If we're doing the same thing every day, and a little bit better each day, that's taking us towards our dream, that's, I think, a little bit different. I'm saying all these things because there really is an unlimited potentiality here to get what you want out of life. We know, obviously, there's some limits here and there. I get it. But the thing is, if you really, really, really want something, then you're going to have to kind of bring in a lot of aspects, right? You're going to have to bring in those visualizations and thought patterns and try to rewire or create new wiring, not rewire necessarily, but create new patterns so that you develop those habits of successful people, or what successful people might have done before. And so you can then become more successful, whatever success means to you, because it's different for everybody, right? And if you could actually see the visual of what eternity actually looks like, it would really blow your mind. And I'm saying that because in many of my meditation journeys, I've been taken, at least in my mind, right? I'm not saying I was physically taken there, but my consciousness was taken to see the smallest particles of the universe and how it all just ebbs and flows with everything, and in the eternity of all of that. I don't even know how to describe it. It was just so many cool things that I've been able to see and experience, not prove, of course. But if even a fraction of the things that I've been witness to through meditation are accurate, then we are really leaving ourselves out of the equation. There's so much that we could have and do, because when creation was made, in many religious scriptures it talks about this, that everything that could possibly be created has been created. It is done. Nothing new under the sun. So everything we need, we have in this reality, in this cosmos, this universe, and within ourselves. Our bodies are full of trillions and trillions and trillions of cells, depending on which book you read. Anywhere from 50 to 100 trillion cells in our body. And each of those cells are like little mini universes. I mean, we have the potentiality within us that is beyond imagination. In this little bitty human body, little bitty compared to the vast eternity of everything, even though we're tiny compared to everything, we are very important. We are a very, very important aspect of everything. Without all of us and all of the other beings across this universe, all of this could not be. We have to be here. We have to be part of the equation. We have to go out and try to become as good of a being, whatever type of being we are, in this case human beings, that we can, because our contribution to becoming better, more loving, more successful in many ways at all levels of existence only contributes to the whole of everything. And so we have to kind of get away from that thinking that becoming successful is evil or bad, or it's being greedy. I'm trying to figure out the right word for this. It's not selfish to become someone, whatever someone you want to become. And if that means you're going to be the biggest star in the world or the biggest pro athlete or the wealthiest person on the planet or the best psychic or the best medium or the best whatever. You should do that, because that all those skills and talents will become part of the whole, just like every cell in your body contributes to the body. When those cells excel, so do you. And so I think you kind of get the idea that life is very complex yet very simple. I mean, life can be very boring, it can be very exciting, it can be sad, it can be happy. There's so many things it could be, but it can also be what you want it to be. And once again, I'm reminding myself that I need to stay the course in this particular dream I'm talking about here behind the mic. And then there's other dreams that I have written up on my mirror. You know, how hard am I really chasing those other ones? Probably not as much as I could, because I can guarantee you that when you go all in on something, you know, that really changes the game. And I can say that there's been some periods in my life where I truly have been all in. And I can't say that there's a couple of those dreams up there that I have gone all in. Maybe I'm just playing with them a little bit too much, and I really need to get more serious about it, right? I'm saying this to me, and I'm saying this to you, and I'm saying this to everybody that would listen here, is that we have to make choices, and those choices we have to live with, and we have to move forward in some way, shape, or form. Even though the future is not necessarily guaranteed, and the past is really not here anymore, whether it existed or not, all we really have is this present moment right now, this eternal moment, because even when we get to tomorrow, it's no longer tomorrow, it's today, it's the present. And so does the future ever exist? And does the past only exist in our own programming, or does it really exist? I mean, without the history books and records, we probably would think that the past is just kind of goes away, just like in a movie. You know, once that movie has passed that point, it's not there anymore, right? And so you kind of get my point, is that we're living in the now, but we also have to understand that if we get to live through tomorrow and on and on and on, if there is a future, that we have to kind of balance that with, we need to balance that with our goals, our dreams, our survival. All of those got to be impacted. We really have to put thought into life, instead of, like Joe Dispenza describes, your average day, doing the same thing over and over again with the same people and the same meals and the same everything. And if you look back, you know, for the last year, and you've done the same thing every day, and you wonder why you haven't gone any farther, well, there's your answer, right? There's my answer. I'm not unhappy with where I'm at. I'm not saying that. I just know that each one of us, including me and you and everybody, has so much potential that we're resting on, we're sitting on, and we don't want to go to our graves with all that stuff. And so here I am pondering life, kind of wandering around with my thoughts. But I think you could kind of feel my tone has changed a little bit as I've talked about this. Because when I first started this talk, it was kind of like really sullen, wasn't it? And it was kind of not depressive, but it just I didn't feel like I was all there, or really, I don't even know how to describe it. But it put me in such contemplation about life that I felt like I needed to talk about this subject tonight. Because I know there's a lot of people out there struggling with it. I know there are. Because we all do the same things every day, and many people are doing it simply because they got to eat. They got to pay the bills and all these things. I understand. Once again, we have the same 24 hours a day that everybody does. So let's maybe plan that out a little bit better. Let's look at what we want to do and actually go do some of those things. You don't have to do them all, because you can't chase every rabbit and catch them. You know, chase one rabbit down. You know, I've been working on this podcast rabbit for a while. Okay, so maybe once this gets up and running a little bit better, then I can put a whole bunch more effort into something else instead of playing around with it, right? So you understand where I'm going here. I will digress, people. I'm going to get off my soapbox. But I would really love to hear from you guys in some way, shape, or form. I do have a website with a contact page. You can go there. You can find my information. If you want to reach out, we can have a conversation about these type of things. My website is lifebymazak.com, lifebymazak.com. I spell that because my last name is a little weird, a little different. I look forward to hearing from you in the future, and you will hear from me many more times. Stay strong and live your life.